Democrat of the day. Now, there are a lot of Democrats who work really, really hard, and I'm big fans of a lot of them. I do not think there's anyone that's worked harder than Representative Jamie Becker-Finn. 42B is the district. She is Democrat of the day for today. Representative, thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
I'm glad to be on the show.
Thank you very much. Welcome back. I want to start off with something that you have been the point person on. It's not something that gets a lot of play here in the metro area, but it is a big issue, and it's chronic wasting disease, something that's been affecting the deer herds here. You've been working on this, but I think really what we need to do is kind of explain exactly what CWD is and what the problem has been and how you're trying to fight that over in St. Paul.
Yeah, so chronic wasting disease, or CWD, is an always fatal disease that affects deer species, and obviously that's a problem here in Minnesota. We have almost 500 million deer hunters in the state of Minnesota, and so this disease is it's similar to mad cow disease in the way that it spreads. And sort of the problem we've been facing is that when we have people artificially moving deer around for business purposes, whether that's kind of these sort of traveling circus kind of shows or, farming deer as livestock, it's presenting some additional risks than what we would have if deer were just moving around naturally on the landscape. And so we have been trying all kinds of different things to try to slow down the spread of the disease before it really takes over our deer herd here in Minnesota. And just as a novice on this issue, how contagious is CWD? Is it something that, when it starts breaking out, is it a 40, 50%, 60% or more on a herd? And is this something that is more confined and as you said, kind of amplified? How much more amplified is it by farming deer? So there's a couple factors with CWD, and you're taking me in a really nerdy direction. But no,
please, this is good. That's good stuff.
I'm a full nerd on this issue, but so a couple things with CWD is that animals can be carrying the disease and shedding the prions, which are misfolded proteins that cause the disease. So instead of a virus or a bacteria, it's a prion. And animals can be spreading those for up to 2 years before they have signs of being sick. So it's not as easy to look at an animal and say, oh, that animal's sick, let's get it away from other animals. It doesn't work like that. Okay. The other factor is that, like I said, it's a prion disease like mad cow disease, and so it can remain in the environment for, some studies are showing 7, maybe even 10 plus years in the environment. And so part of the problem in a farm situation is you have a lot of animals in an enclosed space, and they're always around the same places, as opposed to, wild animals are going to be more spread out. So you'll see in some counties, some of your listeners might live in counties where there are bans on feeding deer, and we encourage all Minnesotans to not feed deer or bait deer in any way, because you're basically artificially bringing them together in closer proximity than they would be in the wild naturally.
What is the efforts that are being put forward by the state here to fight this? Because obviously, like you said, this is deer hunting is a part of Minnesota. It is just part of who we are as a culture. A lot of people do deer hunt. And we have a lot of people that raise deer for venison, for restaurants and grocery stores and stuff like that. It's not exactly, it's not the most unique thing that we have as far as farming goes. But what are we doing to try to limit the spread of this and try to maybe, is there a chance we could even wipe it out, or is that not really even possible?
At this point, the goal is to just slow down the spread of the disease so that it doesn't totally take over the herd like we've seen in Wisconsin. Some areas of Wisconsin, almost half the deer in a given area have the disease. So we have, and I'll say, you mentioned kind of the difference between the metro area and maybe other areas, but the reality is that we have deer hunters that live throughout our state, and it's kind of interesting with this issue. It's not something that I ran on initially, but it's just it was a void that needed to be filled, and I stepped up to do that. But I have folks coming up to me all the time in the suburbs, in the metro area, who are following this, because people deer hunt. We just don't deer hunt in our own backyard here in Roseville. So I think that's very true. And, the other thing to mention is that the CDC, so Center for Disease Control, and kind of all the experts at the U of M and other places don't want us to eat the deer if we know that they have CWD, and that's because of fears of, similar to the outbreak of mad cow on Creutzfeldt-Jakob and kind of the species jump. And so that's really one of the reasons why I fight so hard. I grew up in rural Minnesota, where a lot of folks rely on wild deer meat to feed their families, and if you can't eat that venison, that kind of defeats the whole purpose. So, and I think the other thing to mention too is there are less than 300 commercial deer operations in the state, so it's not some huge industry. But the thing we've really been fighting is, sort of the difference between putting the wild deer herd above business interests. So, again, it sort of gets into that conservation view, and it's one of those things where this is one of the only species that's treated as both livestock and a wild natural resource here in our state.
I saw on your Twitter feed you actually did have a deer farmer come after you a little bit yesterday.
Yeah, well, that was that. I attended a Board of Animal Health meeting. It's not the first time I've had angry deer farmers coming after me, either virtually or in person. But, kind of the level of misinformation and not following science that's going on for some of those folks is a little disturbing. But, that's part of being a public official is being out in front of people like that.
Well, and I want to give you talked about this kind of nerdy. This is exactly the kind of thing I want my politicians to take care of, because this is the stuff we really don't know about. A lot of people don't know about. It's clearly a pretty good-sized problem. I mean, if you're looking at just to our east, they're having larger problems with it. We want to prevent that from happening here. I commend you on this, because this is the proverbial sausage making of politics. It's kind of one of those things that goes in there that, people, we just don't really pay attention to how it's done, but this is the kind of thing that needs to get done, and I'm glad you're working on this.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. We'll keep fighting to push things in the right direction.
I wanted to also bring up an editorial you did in Bluestem Prairie, which I will post a little bit later on the social media pages a little bit later on. MinPost today had a map of all the counties that have voted for refugee resettlement, and there's only one county that has voted this down, Beltrami County up in northern Minnesota. That is where you're from, and you had a few choice words for Beltrami County when it came to their choice to promote bigotry and racism by saying no refugees are welcome.
Yeah, and I think it really was sad for a lot of us who either currently live there. For myself, that's where I grew up in rural Beltrami County. It's this idea, especially in a county where, 1 in 5 residents are Native. And so then for the, all non-Native county board, other than Tim Sumner, for 3 of them to vote against welcoming people in, it just really went against the values, I think, for a lot of us, as far as compassion for those who are most in need, and just a really disheartening vote. Although, as I said in my editorial that I wrote, not completely surprising, because there have been a lot of problems with racism and different issues, cultural issues in the area, based on the Native population and the newer immigrant population of Norwegians and Germans and whatnot. So. Just kind of interesting that it was that county of all the counties when they haven't had very many recent immigrants or refugees in the first place. Yeah,
5 years they haven't had any. I wrote an editorial about it as well, and it's kind of one of those things. I lived in Beltrami County myself. I worked at KKBJ up in Bemidji years and years ago, and when you talk about the racism, I saw it front and center there. It's the as you talk about the Scandinavian and the white settlers that come in there, there's a lot of racism that runs through there, and it's very unfortunate. And I think one of the things that's interesting is Beltrami County might have actually sent a message they didn't intend to, because I think that there is enough people who have said, okay, well, and this is individual choice. A person says, you know what, if you're going to vote this way, I'm not going to go to Beltrami County. I'm not going to spend money there. And that's not necessarily a good thing for Beltrami County, but I think a lot of the other counties in the state are saying to yourself, you know what, no one's boycotting counties that have voted to take refugees. So, it's kind of one of those things where, I don't think this is a tough vote at this point, especially when you see the backlash that Beltrami County has gotten.
Yeah, and one thing that I really highlighted too is the initial reaction by a lot of folks was sort of anger, and I'm going to take action, and I'm not going to go on vacation there, and I'm not going to visit Bemidji, and the point that really I was trying to make, and the thing I was trying to highlight was that there was some talk of withholding state resources from going to the county, and it's a county where a really high percentage of people live in poverty as well. And a lot of those folks, they're both white and Native, but, there are a lot of good people in the area, and we're only going to further harm those folks by sort of punishing all the residents of the county. Maybe a better answer is to, help them recruit and, support new candidates for their county commission, because it sure doesn't seem like some of them are representing the folks who live there very well.
And that's on point with what happened in Anoka Hennepin County School District when they had the problems up there. They got better candidates and they recruited them, and they got a better result. And I think that that's kind of the path there that you're putting forward, and we've seen that be a successful path. I want to make sure we mention Jamie Becker-Finn, Democrat of the Day today, representative from 42B. We've talked about chronic wasting disease, which does to a point affect your district, as well as also, we can talk about refugees as a whole. But I wanted to talk about 42B specifically. Let's talk about one thing that you're happy that you've been able to do for your district as you've been representing them in St. Paul.
Yeah, so just so folks know, 42B is part of Roseville, part of Shoreview, Little Canada, Vadnais Heights, and Gem Lake. And we are a suburban district, but we have 14 lakes. So we care a lot about clean water conservation, environmental issues. And so I've really am proud of a lot of the work that I've done in promoting, better protection of our natural resources. And, one bill, the bill that I'm probably the most proud of in the last year that we did get across the finish line and signed into law was a bill to keep toxic flame retardant chemicals out of household materials. And what that will do is protect firefighters from more cancer risk, as well as protecting children from being exposed to kind of those unnecessary chemicals. And so was able to work with clean water folks as well as our local firefighters. And so that's been a really rewarding issue. And we'll continue to work on issues like that. I have part of the community that's impacted by the water gremlin, TCE, lead poisoning issues is my district as well. So, those are things that are really meaningful in kind of, protecting the health of our residents.
And you are in such a dynamic part of the city's metro area because it is growing still. You still have a lot of room to grow there. It's a very desirable area. It's lovely up there. I've been up there many times, and so it's got some natural charm there. So making sure you maintain that while encouraging that positive growth, I mean, that's always a key.
Yep, and we've got Roseville that's pretty well developed, but then kind of the Vadnais Heights end of the district is very different. So it's a very diverse, and we've got great public school districts and close proximity to a lot of things. So it's a really great place to live. I'm always pitching it, and if folks can't find a place in Roseville, Little Canada, and Vadnais Heights are good options too.
Well, you're going to get up, and they're making an expansion to Rosedale again now. They're making it even better down there.
Yep, Rosedale, just the gift that keeps on giving, I guess. And it's funny, for us locals, sometimes we avoid going to the mall just because they're always so busy. But definitely a great asset to our community.
I want to encourage everyone once again. Obviously, it's a campaign year. Jamie Becker-Finn, I'm feeling pretty good about her chances of returning. Don't take anything for granted. Remember what Ken Martin said on Monday. Don't take anything for granted. So if you'd like to donate or volunteer, Becker-Finn.org, correct?
Yep, Becker-Finn.org, and we'd love to have anyone who wants to help us kind of in the campaign and the way that we're moving things forward here is greatly appreciated. As you mentioned at the lead-in, we'll be working plenty hard in the campaign and during the legislative session. I don't really know any other way to operate than to work like that. So.
Well, it shows. It just shows. Becker-Finn, BECKER-FINN.org. I'll link to that as well online a little bit later on. It is an absolute privilege to get to talk to you, Representative. Thank you very much for the time.
Yeah, thank you.
Jamie Becker-Finn, representative from 42B, Democrat of the Day.